Hi girls, this is part 2 of your test review podcast for chapter 28. And I'm starting out with this things to study slide. Um, so in addition to this, I want you to make sure you are familiar with all of the required works by the College Board. I want you to look through your worksheets that I handed back to you because I'm going to pull a couple questions from those worksheets. Obviously go through your notes, play the Jeopardy! Um, and it would not hurt to watch a couple of the Khan Academy videos again too, because that's really where I pull all of my questions from. I already gave you your prompt for your essay. You're going to have to discuss two works of art that functioned as political propaganda or social propaganda, and you're going to have to discuss them in detail. So you should be formulating your outline right now. I feel like I've gone over a number of works that would be good choices for that essay. So with that being said, I'm going to go back to Turner because I didn't really get to talk about him enough, and he's one of my favorite painters from the Romanticism movement. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about photography and architecture. So we're looking at Turner's The Slave Ship, which I mentioned in my last podcast, but I want you to really take the time to look at this in a little bit more detail and compare this to some of the other landscapes that we looked at in class. I talked about how Turner was a contemporary of John Constable, and this is his painting of the hay wain. So I think that provides a really good comparison. This is also a landscape, or a seascape rather, where the ocean is the dominant part of the scene, and you have this beautiful mixture of warm colors, a lovely sunset going on in the distance. So from afar, it just looks like a pretty seascape. But after you read the title and after you get a little bit closer to the painting, you see what's really going on. So what happened was, this happened in 1783, and it was during the time of the slave trade. And apparently the captain of this ship departing from England found out from his insurance company that he would only be reimbursed for slaves that were lost at sea, but not for those who actually died on the ship. So he ordered all of the sick slaves, the injured slaves who were on the brink of death, he just had them thrown overboard into the sea. So you see the ship off in the distance here, and then in the foreground you have all of these bodies, all of these limbs kind of protruding from the water. There's even some seagulls fluttering around them, just kind of pecking at them. So it's really this horrible, violent scene. And really embodies that idea of the sublime, which I mentioned before. And this style is Turner's signature style. So you can really spot his paintings pretty easily because he loved that dry brush technique, that very textured technique, the visible brush strokes. His paintings often have a lot of movement to them. He also painted the burning of the Houses of Parliament. That's what you're looking at right here at the top. And then this one is a locomotive, which is also reflective of the Industrial Revolution. So be familiar with his style. I could really see them giving you an attribution question for Turner. Here are some details from that same painting. I know you're sick of me saying this, but if you have time, you should watch Simon Schama's Power of Art on Turner. He does another really great job. And I have a little tube chop here. Hopefully the link still works, from one of my favorite parts of that video, so you can get a better view of the painting. Girls, don't hate me, but I just realized that I left out one artwork from the list from this chapter that we need to know. It's actually the Palace of Westminster. The architects are Charles Barry and Augustus W.N. Pugin, and it's in London. So I'm going to talk about that briefly now, but you can add that to your list of flashcards, and I'm sorry I forgot to tell you that before. Is the Palace of Westminster, and it was actually redesigned and rebuilt after it burned down in 1835. Or I'm sorry, 1834. It originally burned down, and then Charles Barry and AWN Pugin came up with the winning design to redo the Houses of Parliament. So this is what they came up with, and it's pretty cool because it's kind of a fusion of the Gothic style with a little bit of the neoclassical style. So when you think of neoclassical architecture, hopefully you think of Monticello by Thomas Jefferson. Remember, we compared that to Palladio's Villa Rotunda. Very regular, very orderly, very symmetrical. And the plan of the Houses of Parliament is fairly rational, very axial in nature. However, the exterior of it, hopefully you are noticing some of the Gothic influence there. Okay, so what Gothic characteristics do you see? It's been a while since we looked at some Gothic cathedrals, but remember Notre Dame and Chartres and Cologne and all of those big Gothic cathedrals. What similarities do you see between those and the Houses of Parliament? Well, hopefully you're taking note of the big bell tower. Okay, so you have Big Ben on the left, and you also have a lot of spires. Remember these little pointy spires everywhere. So it's a somewhat decorative facade with a lot of Gothic detail to it, and you also have some medieval influence as well. So the architects kind of rejected the new industrial style, the new kind of cookie cutter iron buildings that were starting to become popular in favor for this old school Gothic medieval style, which is pretty interesting. I just realized Big Ben is not on the left, Big Ben is on the right. This is called the Victoria Tower on the other end. Okay, the invention of photography, really important. And some of the works that we're going to look at would be good examples if you get a question about a new technology or an innovation that comes about, because photography is obviously a really important innovation. So we did look at the camera obscura and talk about it briefly when we studied Jan Vermeer in the last chapter, because he used the camera obscura for a lot of his paintings. Remember, he did a lot of the interior domestic scenes. Well, that led to more exploration of photography, and eventually we see the invention of the Daguerreotype in 1839 by Louis-Jacques Daguerre. And before that, William H.F. Talbot developed the calotype, and they're very similar. They have a few minor differences. So the calotype has more of a grainy quality, and it also produces both a positive and a negative image, whereas the daguerreotype used a very shiny plate that had to be burnished to a very meticulous, smooth finish. It had a lot of, it had a lot of clarity and detail, so it was less grainy than the calotype. However, it had no negatives, so you couldn't make more than one of them. This is not a required work. I just like it. I think it's really pretty. This is a combined work between Eugene Derault and Eugene Delacroix. Remember Liberty Leading the People? So they kind of collaborate on this photo. And I also have there in the slide, there's an influence of Ingres. Why do you think I would say that? Hopefully you're recalling the Grand Odalisque of the woman, the reclining nude, and we can see her long back, which is kind of the focus of the painting. And so we see that once again. So it's kind of the painting but in photograph form, which is pretty cool. And before I continue on, just a little bit more about photography. So the invention of the camera, the invention of photography leads to a lot of changes in the art world. As expected, a lot of people and a lot of artists rejected photography. They didn't think that it was important as drawing and painting. They didn't think of it as high art like drawing and painting. So there was a lot of pushback with the invention of photography. Um, by the same token, a lot of artists such as Delacroix, Ingres, Courbet, and even Degas, who we're going to get to when we study Impressionism, appreciated photography and dabbled in photography, and they also used photography as an aid for painting and drawing, which we do today. So you all have taken other art classes, and so you all understand the importance of using photo references for things, okay? So that, this is the beginning of that. Artists are realizing how helpful photography can be. We're looking at Daguerre's still life in studio done in 1837. And this was, I think, one of his first successful plates that Daguerre produced. And this is very much a still life arrangement, very much influenced by the 17th century Dutch Vanitas still life paintings that we studied. And I have one right here by Peter Claes, who was a Dutch still life painter. I think this is done in oil. So you can kind of compare and contrast these two, the photograph from the 19th century with the oil painting from the 17th century. There's a lot of differences, but there is also a lot of similarities between the two. And the big one is that the artist is using objects to convey symbolic meaning, okay? So hopefully you remember that the Vanitas still life was all about kind of the impermanence of life, that death will come to all, that material wealth is fleeting and frivolous. And so both of these artists are conveying that idea in different ways. So you have, I think this is a sculpture of a Cupid's face. You also have this like relief carving. So there are emblems of love in there, but the overarching theme is that life is fleeting, life will end no matter what. So I'm not going to talk too much more. I'm going to end with this photograph. It's not in your list of required works, but I think it's just really moving and kind of goes along with the theme of war and violence and propaganda and the horrors of war. That's kind of been a reoccurring theme throughout this chapter. This is a photograph by Timothy O'Sullivan, and it's A Harvest of Death. This was taken in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and we're looking at a battlefield. We're looking at people who actually died in the Civil War. And this is a reflection of the high price of war. So one of the, first photographs ever made, and this is kind of the message that it's sending. So I'm going to end with that. So good luck studying for your test, and I will see you on Monday.